I believe between the people that are sitting here, we appreciate your presence. And those who are joining us online, that we have a majority. I'm going to ask Lana if she will take the roll and then get into the meeting. Thank you so much for coming today. It's so good to see all of you.
All right, I'm going to say your organization, and if you could just follow that with your name, that'd be great. Okay, Audubon, Florida. Friends of the Hillsborough River. Okay, Sierra Club. Tampa Bay Conservancy.
Oh, Nancy Stevens, Sierra Club, sorry.
Tampa Bay Conservancy. Okay, Tampa Bay Waterkeeper.
And Justin Tramble.
Tampa Bay Watch.
Sarah Herndon.
Joe Island Clams. Environmental Consulting. Gulfstream Natural Gas. Tampa Bay Pilots Association.
Terry Fluke.
Mosaic.
This is Keith Nadaski, the Mosaic.
And Tampa Electric Company.
Nick Fletcher with Tampa Electric.
UF IFAS and Florida Sea Grant. Okay, USF. Good College. And Noelle is a new member, by the way. She replaced Jeff. And Hillsborough Elected.
Kim.
Oh.
Commissioner Pat Kim.
Hillsborough Staff.
David Glicksberg.
Manatee Staff.
Alyssa Powers.
Pasco Elected.
I'm subbing for Commissioner Colleen Weaver.
Pasco Staff. Pinellas Staff.
Stacey Day.
Port Tampa Bay. Okay, Port of St. Petersburg. Manatee Port Authority. Okay, St. Petersburg. City of St. Pete. Okay. City of Tampa.
Heather Maggio with the City of Tampa.
Okay. City of Clearwater. Okay, we have our chair here. And our vice chair. Army Corps of Engineers. Okay, USGS. NOAA.
Dave Rydeen sitting in for Mark Ceramic.
FDEP.
Melissa Madden.
Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission.
Michelle Sunstruck for Amelia Bissau.
Right, FDOT.
Allison Connor.
Jim Jacobson.
Southwest Florida Water Management District.
Chris Anastasio.
Our Hillsborough at-large member.
Ian Paul.
Our Pinellas at-large member.
George Henderson.
The Environmental Protection Commission of Hillsborough County.
Chris Pratt.
Hillsborough County City County Planning Commission.
Sean College.
Right, Tampa Bay Estuary Program.
Ed Sherwood.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Sinead Borchert.
Right, McDill Air Force Base.
Jason Kirkpatrick.
Tampa Bay Water. Okay, well, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Alana. And thank you all for coming. I gotta tell you all something. I bet many of you We're at the Natural Resources meeting. To me, it's inspiring to see so many folks in the Tampa Bay region participating in this, because this is so very, very important. If you have not seen the report that was put together on the importance of Tampa Bay, I believe we have several copies here. They're out there. Be sure to pick one up, because it's very, very important as you share what you're doing and the importance of what we're doing right here in this room. At this point, I'm going to see, is there anyone here from the public that would like to be heard? Nobody? Okay, then we will move on to item number 4, approval of the full agency meeting minutes on June the 8th. Do I have a motion? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right, I referenced the Natural Resource Environmental Impact Meeting, and I've asked Alana if she would give us a summary. I think many of you who are here today were at that meeting and you saw the interest, but Alana, would you mind sharing, please, what happened?
Sure. So as many of you were here, the ABM's Natural Resources and Environmental Impact Review Committee met on August 16th. We had 2 presentations, one from the Army Corps of Engineers on their Tampa Harbor Navigation Improvement Study that summarizes the measures for deepening, widening the passing lanes and other channel modifications in Tampa Bay. And then it also includes some preliminary sites for the beneficial use of dredged material. So I collected the feedback during the meeting. I just sent it over to the Army Corps, and I thought I would summarize it for you all really quickly. So it was recommended that the Army Corps look at the comprehensive effects of the dredging project on the hydrodynamics and the biology of Tampa Bay, including any changes to the salinity wedge and recruiting species. And then it was recommended that the hydrodynamic and salinity modeling take place. The Army Corps should be considering their own studies when new beneficial use of dredged material projects are being identified, such as the South Atlantic Coastal Study recommendations. The Army Corps should make every effort to mitigate the adverse impacts to species during the 6-year dredging. And then they do need to consider any kind of mitigation requirements within their cost assessments. There are opportunities to better coordinate with FWC for the restoration of seagrasses and nesting shorebird sites. And then collaboration with other agencies was recommended. The future resiliency of habitat should be considered with all placement options. The capacity requirements for future ships and the air draft limitations of the Skyway should inform the dredging design. And then there needs to be continual monitoring before, during, and after the dredging. There should be assurance that there are no long-term losses, and long-term monitoring was strongly encouraged. So recognizing that, you know, there are economic benefits to the port and to the state of Florida through this project, but we also realize there is great importance of recreational and commercial fisheries, and that needs to be recognized. So that was a summary of the recommendations that we provided here during the meeting. I sent that over to the Army Corps. And then we also heard a presentation from MacDill Air Force Base on some of their beneficial use of dredged material project concepts. Some of those included the creation of new and expansion of existing submerged shallow shelf habitat, the placement of dredged material to reestablish historic longshore sandbar systems, the creation of barrier islands within the MacDill Marine Exclusion Zone, placement of sand at the base of existing riprap revetment, sediment enhancement within the existing mangrove estuaries, and restoring bay bottom by filling select historic dredged holes with sandy material for seagrass expansion. So that was just a quick summary of that meeting. We had really good participation. Thank you all for showing up in person. It's really good discussion. So that's my summary.
How many of you who are here now and online participated in that meeting? Just raise your hand. Okay, thank you. And by the way, Sean Sullivan just came in. He's the director of our RPC. He's very interested in everything we do. Glad you joined us, Sean. Okay, you heard the recommendations, and what we're going to do is pass those on to the Regional Planning Council for an official blessing. Does anybody have anything they want to add to what that committee said? All okay with us going ahead and sharing that with the Regional Planning Council? No objection, then at the next RPC meeting, our vice chair and I will go ahead and give that to the regional council so they can officially say, you know, this is what we care about. We want you to take a look at it and incorporate that in your planning. And as time goes along with this project, we will be following it to see if there are any environmental issues that you all think we need to bring up to the council. The council needs to share with these folks. Okay with all of you? All right, then we're going to go ahead and move on to the EPC's living shoreline permitting rule changes. And just briefly, I'm going to tell you that they revised their regulation to try to make it easier and more cost effective, particularly for residents who are building a living shields, who want to be involved in building living shorelines. And you all know what that is, but we're going to get a more detailed presentation. They did some rule revisions back in 20 and 21 to encounter some of the native-based solutions. The EP staff is looking for additional feedback for their 2024 revision to further clarify and promote the shoreline stabilization projects. So further replication across Tampa Bay will be discussed. So listen carefully. Kim Taggart with the Environmental Protection Commission of Hillsborough County is going to be presenting their new permitting rule changes that facilitate the installation of these living shorelines. So if you will, please
You
take
might
it up.
swap the screens.
A lot of the information is going to be on PowerPoint as well. Sure to take notes because we want to get your feedback on this.
Yeah.
I'm exactly what it was. He was just small. So.
Got it?
So yeah, every time it's been doing something.
The online.
Okay.
Wouldn't be an ABM meeting if we didn't have technical difficulties at this point.
Absolutely.
Does the online group see this screen or?
Yeah, we see just like the PowerPoint screen with the thumbnails on the side, but that's okay, I think.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Tapley, and I worked at the Environmental Protection Commission of Hillsborough County for almost 18 years now. This is my first time presenting to the ABM, and I'm thrilled to be here to discuss how EPC is encouraging native-based solutions for shoreline stabilization projects. The audience today knows how important shorelines are, and as a recent reminder with Hurricane Idalia, our coasts and shorelines serve as invaluable natural defenses against storms, flooding, and sea level rise. Just for perspective, it's estimated that Florida has 825 miles of sandy beaches, with 525 miles categorized as having some form of erosion. The photo at the bottom slide is a picture from a recent hurricane in St. Augustine.
The good news and the bad news, right? There we go. Okay. Sorry, oh. Okay. I'm a true believer that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here's an example of how important natural shorelines are. This is an aerial of Scout Key in the Florida Keys off of US Highway 1. It was taken shortly after Hurricane Irma. Notice where there were no mangroves, there was roadbed erosion, but in areas where there were mangroves, there was no roadbed erosion. This is another example, still with Hurricane Irma along US Highway 1 in the Keys. Here, there was a narrower degraded beach dune area, and there was roadbed erosion here along the highway. But again, you can see the natural shoreline area with the more increased beach dune area. It had no roadbed. A brief video clip of a wave tank, and it shows an example of your wave action being significantly reduced by native shoreline. We all know how important native-based solutions are for shoreline stabilization projects. But what's next? Well, we can use talking points to explain to property owners the benefits of living shorelines. Have the cost efficiency for structural stabilization in low energy environments. Then we have increased wildlife access in critical habitat areas, a natural buffer that reduces coastal erosion by absorbing wave energy, a decrease in harmful nutrients and pollutants entering coastal waters, and an increased aesthetic and value and privacy. It also helps to have these case studies and other examples of projects that have been constructed. The DEP has great online resources as part of their Resilient Florida program. As seen here, this is actually a screenshot from their interactive map. So we know why shorelines are important and we have our talking points, but now what do we do? Well, we try and find ways to encourage native shoreline projects through regulation changes. The EPC's basis of review was adopted in 2008 by the Commission. Miscellaneous activities and wetlands review is located in Chapter 5 of that document. MAIWs, miscellaneous activities, are projects that are considered of nominal consequence to the wetland and therefore do not require wetland impact reviews, nor do they require mitigation. If the project does not qualify for this MAIW type of review, then the applicant may still apply for a wetland impact review with mitigation. Purpose of our rule revisions were to achieve consistency between EPC and other state and local agencies, in addition to clarifying and codifying existing permitting programs. Since this BOR rule was adopted in 2008, EPC Wetlands has received 2 delegations, and these delegations provide our citizens one-stop permitting at EPC. Many of the rule revisions were proposed in an effort to further this goal and to make the permitting process clear for potential applicants and EPC staff. So for this 2021 revision, the shoreline stabilization section had previously been 3 paragraphs. The revised section was then reorganized into 3 distinct categories: native shorelines, riprap, and seawalls. So native shorelines would include those regrading activities to obtain appropriate planting zones and slopes. And the riprap language would codify technical criteria such as boulder size, but then that language also states that the applicant needs to demonstrate significant ongoing shoreline erosion where natural shoreline stabilization is not feasible. And then the seawall language further clarifies some technical review criteria for these types of shoreline stabilization construction activities in wetlands.
But again, the applicant needs to demonstrate that erosion cannot be corrected by means of native vegetation or the use of riprap. Thus, it provides this type of hierarchy of review for shoreline stabilization projects. Furthermore, a new seawall shall be limited to residential man-made canal systems where functioning seawalls exist on both immediate adjacent properties. Now, this is only limited to the MIW type of review. It is necessary in some cases for strong shoreline erosion that new seawalls be constructed. In that case, it would be reviewed under the wetland impact and mitigation type of review. So then in 2022, based on some stakeholder feedback we received and support from our commissioners, we reorganized a section now titled Native-Based Solutions. That includes native shorelines, which we already had an existing activity type for, and then native shorelines with minimum shoreline hardening, which was a new activity type. So these provisions were made to identify criteria such as including the use of breakwaters and soil confinement technology, commonly known as GeoWeb. These materials are often necessary to enhance the survivability of vegetation and to protect the site from wave action. The main purpose of creating this additional shoreline activity is to encourage shoreline enhancement activities along natural water bodies such as the Hillsborough River. A 50% fee reduction for activities under this native-based solution category was proposed to encourage and incentivize property owners to consider this method of shoreline stabilization over riprap or seawalls. In 2021, the rule amendments, EPC created an exempt activities section which identified activities that are of nominal consequence to the wetland and require little or have little potential environmental impacts. Many of our exemptions deal with maintenance, replacement, and repairs. So natural shoreline vegetation is encouraged by EPC and the county. Therefore, there's an exemption for this activity as long as there's no regrading. On the screen, you can see exemption number 6, which encourages the planting of native vegetation as a shoreline stabilization measure. However, feedback was received that native plantings require support in order to enhance the survivability of these vegetation. Thus, the use of fiber logs was added to the existing native planting exemption. Because EPC encourages native plantings and natural shoreline stabilization measures, this 50% reduced fee is approved for environmentally beneficial activities that fall under this new basis of review section titled Native-Based Solutions. The fee reduction applies to miscellaneous activities, authorizations, and minor work permits under EPC's delegation from the port. Please be advised that if a native-based solution activity includes another activity under the same kind of review, the higher fee shall still apply. For example, if you apply for a native-based solution, shoreline stabilization, and dock, the dock fee is going to apply. In conclusion, we all need tools in our toolbox to encourage native-based solutions for shoreline stabilization projects. EPC's revised rule language addresses the feedback from the regulated community and other stakeholders and clarifies the application of certain criteria. These rule amendments clarifying ongoing practices to afford the applicant a better understanding of the rule criteria, saving time and increasing our permitting efficiency. The increased specificity improves and streamlines the process so that project submittals will have more detailed guidance on what activities qualify for an MIW permit or one of our listed exemptions. Future rule revisions to further encourage and clarify shoreline stabilization projects are anticipated. Stakeholder feedback is appreciated, much appreciated during this process. If the project does not qualify for an MIW, then the applicant may still apply for a wetland impact review with mitigation.
And as a disclaimer, Port Tampa Bay submerged lands management rules are still applicable. And in some cases, they can be more stringent than the criteria listed in our basis of review. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
Yes, please.
It's a great presentation and it's great to hear this. I haven't seen the detail. Tampa and Hillsborough County have had encouragement for nature-based solutions and shorelines for years, but because it's the Port Authority and EPC that applies this, it's great that you've done this in your rules. I noticed on your last slide, in your conclusions, it mentions, I couldn't read the whole thing because it's screen here, but Port Tampa Bay's rules are not yet maybe in sync with this. Can you expand on that?
So how that comes into play is some of our exemptions still need a permit from Port Tampa Bay. For example, we have an exemption that someone can replace an existing functioning seawall. Just a straight exemption. They don't have to come to us for that kind of review. The Port Authority does not have that same exemption, so they will still need a Port Authority permit for that kind of activity.
Somebody else have a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know they're relatively new in terms of implementation, but have you seen any change in proportion of the applications that you're receiving so far?
We've only received a handful of them. But what we were planning on doing maybe in 2024, we would really want to have a contractor workshop to discuss a lot of these new techniques with contractors. Because what we found is that a lot of the contractors just immediately jump to seawall. You know, you're having shoreline problems, go to a seawall. We want to educate not only the property owners, but the contractors as well, that they don't immediately have to jump to a seawall. There are other options out there.
Is EPC planning to track that sort of the type of applicants being received?
They may, we have a new database, and so we're constantly adding different things that we're able to track. And it may be an item that we could track in the future. We can look into that.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Earlier on in the presentation, you mentioned that this is the seawalls will only be permitted in canals.
So under the miscellaneous activities section, so miscellaneous activity is projects that are of nominal consequence, like docks or seawalls and canals. If it is a new seawall in a natural area, like along a river or a lake, they may still be able to be permitted, but it would have to be under a different permitting review, the wetland impact and mitigation review.
Yes, sir.
So I guess what my question is that, does that require an additional easement? You know, that additional, whatever, how many feet you go waterward from the seawall? Is that an additional burden on the homeowner to actually get that done? Or as opposed to just putting in the seawall, they would also have to use that space out in front of their property?
Well, this picture here of the riprap along the seawall, this is optional. It would not be a requirement right now in our rules. It's not set up that way.
So in that situation, would the homeowner have to obtain an additional easement from, I guess, Port Authority for the submerged lands, or?
No additional easement would be required from the port to place riprap material in front of the seawall. That would be something that could be permitted under their rules.
Thank you.
We have a question online.
And who is that?
Tom Reese asked, does the port utilize these new rules and cost reductions where they issue permits for estuarine waters?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. And if you open the chat, you could see them too. But he asked, does the port utilize these new rules and cost reductions where they issue permits, especially for estuarine waters?
So if it comes in to Michael is our program manager for the delegation we have for the Port Authority, it would automatically get that 50%
be because it's coming through us. If it came through Port Authority through a standard work permit,
They would not have that fee reduction if somebody applied directly to the port for a standard work permit.
Can you repeat what he said? Because some
Okay,
of us
yes.
couldn't hear.
the answer of my goal was, you know, if someone submits directly to the port, they would not automatically have that 50% fee reduction.
Okay, anybody else?
Looks like we have another one online.
Okay, would you mind reading it, please?
He has his hand raised, so he just needs to unmute himself.
Yep, sorry about that. My question is, if we were to move forward and install a living shoreline, potentially using riprap, would that then prevent us from changing that section of a seawall in the future, should our needs change?
For EPC regulation, we look at projects that come then as it is permitted based on the justification of what the shoreline is. So if you decide to do riprap and then in the future decide to do a seawall or vice versa, we look at it on a case by case basis. So if you have the documentation and the justification that you need that type of shoreline stabilization, then that's what we will work with you to get permitted.
That answer your question, Nick?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to? Yes, go ahead, please.
Jim, the fee reduction,
Yes.
how is that financially impacting EPC? And was that fee reduction based on any kind of science or just a discount? You're talking about nutrient reduction, suspended solids reduction.
It was a discount incentivized program is what we were looking at it for, almost like a coupon for the homeowners to further incentivize, hey, why don't you look into this? This is a really great option instead of immediately jump into trying to permit a seawall.
Can you give us an idea of what the cost differences are?
Certainly. So a seawall under miscellaneous activities would be $380. So if you do a native shoreline instead, it's 50% of $380.
Anne has the question.
So I have a question. You showed in your slideshow an off-water breakwater situation where you had the rocks creating a shallow water calm area next to the shoreline. Is that included in this 50% reduction?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we have an online question,
No,
don't we? So something up there, no?
no, but I
Gotcha.
would like to say
Go ahead.
something really quickly. So it seems like these new rule revisions, the cost reductions are to try and incentivize these living shorelines, but they're pretty restricted to just freshwater areas, right? Not.
No, they can be saltwater too.
Okay, but a lot of the estuarine areas that overlap, at least with the port, wouldn't have these same cost reductions, right?
They would because they fall under our port delegation. So if it falls under the port delegation and it comes to EPC for our one-stop permitting, we're issuing an EPC permit embedded in a minor work permit for the port, it still gets the 50%.
I think what I heard is that those are typically the minor permits, but the standard permits, which go to the port and don't get delegated, if they go straight to the port does not currently offer that incentive.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. And so I guess if we want to incentivize this bay-wide, we're going to have to look to the port to adopt similar rule revisions and then also look to Pinellas County to adopt similar rule revisions. So we're consistent and incentivizing these widely. So I'm not an official member of the ABM, but I would encourage someone to I guess propose maybe sending some kind of a letter of support to the port and to Pinellas County to consider similar rule revisions so that we're incentivizing them across Tampa Bay and not just those areas that are just under the jurisdiction of the.
If you wish, that could come forth as a recommendation to the council and we can then pass it on. I have a little more. Yeah,
It's up to you guys to propose that.
I'll make that motion, including Manatee County as well.
And to include Manatee County.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion at all?
I'll just ask, do we know if Manatee County or Nellis County is anywhere along the process of considering this type of program?
That's a good question.
That's part of what has to happen.
You don't want to say something?
No, we don't.
So Stacy said she doesn't know. I think we have Alyssa online from Manatee County. Alyssa, did you hear that question?
Yes. I don't know of anything currently at Manatee County level.
Perhaps this information could be shared with them to get a reaction before we get into it too deeply.
Absolutely.
It seems to me that $200 is not much of an incentive in a multi-$1,000 project. And if we really want to incentivize this, we're going to have to go much deeper into the educational part of informing the homeowner of what some real benefits are. And they sort of have to be identified as homeowner benefits as opposed to bay benefits or benefits to the county comprehensive plan or something of that nature. And I'm not quite sure how you develop that program. But I think that as you go forward with a more broader application of this idea that the incentivization needs to be enhanced somehow.
It's an excellent observation. So we need to really let the general public know what we're talking about, so they get more incentivized to participate. Great.
That's what I believe, yes.
I think you're right. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I have a kind of a comment.
Please.
Our Pasco coastline, 40% undeveloped. We're seeing sea level rise creep in Arapika, and we're losing palm trees and everything's dying off. So I would like to drag it back to using that double layer. I think Tico brought that up, the gentleman from Tico, making sure that we have that option of having, I know on the East Coast, when some of the conferences I've seen them use not only the native, but also an armored shoreline. So it would be really advanced to think forward about what's going to be happening, and that knowing eventually while mangroves stop a storm coming on shore, it's not going to slow a sea level rise scenario. So having that extra seawall for roads or whatever, but having all of it, there's not going to be one answer, basically, is the way I'm seeing it, and I could be wrong, but there's going to be multiple layers of answers, not just the mangroves. We're waiting to see, we got clobbered pretty good from that storm that went up. We had some flooding, but I think I'm waiting to see the maps on what the mangroves protected. There was a neighborhood that's like surrounded by mangroves, and they didn't have nearly as many losses as they did north of them. So it's going to be interesting to see, as we're still cleaning up from the storm, how those mangroves did help. I mean, I totally agree with that, but when it comes to sea level rise, I'm gonna, sit and think that we may need more than just a living wall.
Oh, sure.
Living shoreline.
Absolutely. I'm hearing something from y'all. I just want to see what you think, but it seems to me, just from what some of the few comments I've heard, that one of the problems, and I'm speaking not as a scientist, but as a citizen, that we often have is that some of the problems that are created environmentally are caused by people not understanding that they can have a proactive approach. And perhaps we ought to be exploring the option of doing some public education awareness. This is what you can do. Because I know this last storm that we had, my dad had built our property like 10 feet above everybody else because he was an engineer. Everyone else got flooded. We didn't. So I think a lot of what we could be doing, I'm just throwing this out as an idea to see what y'all think, but maybe we should be exploring doing something where we get the citizens more involved in participating in a proactive way. Y'all think that would help?
Absolutely.
That I think pairs nicely with Blake Simmons added a comment in the chat saying we have some upcoming research looking into homeowner barriers and incentives to living shoreline adoption. We'd be happy to collaborate with interested partners in answering some of these important questions across Tampa Bay.
Good. Who said that?
Blake Simmons with the Estuary Program.
Yeah, just to
Great.
expand upon that, working in partnership with Ecosphere Restoration Institute and City of St. Pete Beach, what Blake is referring to is trying to get at the human dimensions of implementing these different strategies on homeowners that live on the water. So the first part of that is just understanding their general perceptions. And then the education components, I think, are the great one that George just mentioned. And my comments were going to be mirroring what he just said in terms of finding additional incentives and encouragement for adoption. At one point, I know the Sea Grant extension agents were providing some education to homeowners on alternatives to seawall applications in the region. I think that program died out probably due to lack of funding, but if that comes out of this new research that Blake is mentioning as a need to further bolster awareness among those homeowners that are living on the water for different options other than seawalls, then we'd be happy to support that, but we're trying to let that research kind of guide the next steps.
Or in addition to what she was saying, you only seawalls aren't enough. Maybe we can do both.
Yeah.
That's what I heard you
Yeah,
say.
the tier, like the East Coast, you see it more on the East Coast of Florida where you see like a tiered approach. It almost looks like a stairscaping going up. And how they do, you know, the natural initially, and then they do more barriers as it's getting closer to in the roads and the properties and things, so.
Okay.
Just,
Yes,
and just to add,
I saw that, Commissioner.
Yeah,
Do you have something you wanted to say?
I just, I'm not as familiar with it as probably everybody in this room.
Glad
but,
you're here.
I'm just wondering about insurance incentives for people. And if there's any, it would seem to me, just like you said, and I know many examples of that, we've seen it of, where homes or property haven't been harmed because of just these kinds of things that were put in. So I just didn't know if there's any program like that or how, I mean, it seems like that might be, I don't even know how we would go about trying to
First, we
make that
gotta
happen a little bit.
First, we gotta let the public know and get them, and we can work on things too. That's good. That's a great idea. There's some other, we have someone online. Okay, can you tell me who it is?
Yeah, Allison Roberts asked, has any type of joint marketing campaign between EPC and the port been considered or pursued to educate homeowners or community associations in older local waterfront communities? I don't know if we have anyone from the port online, but have you all worked with the port to do that?
Not for a marketing campaign, but it's certainly a good idea that we can.
Might be a good idea. And it's what you were saying, Ed, program that the estuary is doing. Potential, I think there might be some opportunities for cooperation and implementation of what you're doing.
Yeah, certainly, and what messages might resonate with homeowners too is we will come out of that research. I just wanted to also add to what Colleen was saying with regards to multiple interventions. You know, there has been investments through Fish and Wildlife Research Institute in the region to develop a living shoreline suitability model. So there are tools out there that homeowners can use to understand what interventions might be practical in their situation, because not every shoreline is conducive to a living shoreline based on the energy it might receive. So there are some tools out there. I think we just need to be doing a better job probably as scientists and managers of making that more accessible and making citizens aware that there's options other than seawalls that they could pursue.
Thank you, Ed. Yes, sir.
And I want to thank EPC and other permitters who are starting to recognize the value of living shoreline. It's very intimidating for a waterfront homeowner to think that they have to weigh into a new permitting process. So being able to provide them guidance, a little bit of a financial incentive. I love the idea about insurance. I think that's great. I think that's going to be one of the big hangups as we look at the future of sea level rise and shoreline protection, things like that. And any other kind of incentives like Bay Grant program that helps provide a little bit of seed money to do community programs so that other residents can see the value of living shoreline. I know we get a lot of requests all the time from private landowners to do our Tampa Bay Watch living shoreline type of projects. We just can't accommodate that. It's difficult to do the small scale when you're looking at larger scale type projects. So incentives are great, and I think it's fantastic that the regulatory agencies are starting to recognize that we need to make the process easier for everybody.
Thank you. That's a good observation. Any other comments? We have another one online.
Maybe get to Tom and then to you, Stacey. So Tom, do you want to unmute yourself and just share your comment?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to have two comments that, talk about training for living shorelines. UF IFAS does do statewide living shoreline courses. In fact, they just had one in Jacksonville, where I am at right now as part of the training group. So we're trying to get the message out to contractors and to citizens and even to the local agencies statewide that, these are options to protecting shorelines that are not the traditional hardening. And part two is, the comment from Pasco County, they have really low lands and they do have issues, but we can achieve a resiliency with just raising the upland. It doesn't have to be a vertical wall. You can have a living shoreline and then plus raise the upland to the elevation 5, which is the Regional Planning Council's approved elevation. And so that'll take us through 2060. So I just want to make that comment. We can achieve resiliency without a vertical wall.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I have someone else.
So I believe there's gonna be a living shoreline of contractor training in Tarpon Springs in November. So we can send that information out. Also, so your homeowners still have to do like a DEP permit, right? And perhaps an Army Corps?
Yes, we do have delegation for single family homeowners for DEP.
But they still have to do the Army Corps.
And we have some limited Army Corps delegation as well.
Okay, because I think for the couple of homeowners who've been interested in like just putting some riprap against their seawall, they've gotten kind of denied that easy homeowner exemption permit. And so, we've been promoting it, but then we kind of pulled back from promoting it because the permitting through the state and federal agencies were kind of onerous. So any ideas from folks about how to make that easier? I think the county could do something like what you guys have done, but I don't really know how to get around some of the other stricter permitting processes.
I think with state and federal regulations, it's harder for them to initiate any changes. And it takes longer. It's taken a while to catch up in some instances, but I am the president of FLARA, Florida Local Environmental Resource Agencies. We're a nonprofit, and our goal is to have local cities and counties meet and discuss different regulations, different ideas, different processes and efficiencies throughout the state of Florida. So it's something that we've been talking about on the local level, but it's just getting the partners with the state that we need to get together to kind of brainstorm and see how different regulation changes at the state and the federal level can help what we're doing here at the county board.
Okay, one more question and we've got to move on because we've got some.
Comment on like the Army Corps permit, if, there is an exemption. I guess if there was a way, I don't know what group would clarify, get clarification from the Army Corps, what projects, what design would qualify for an exemption and just have that generic, schematic plan, whatever, so that people can tailor their projects to fit within, they know will be exempted from the permitting. So there are, exempted, but I think it's pretty short, like 10 feet from the mean high water line and things like that. But if contractors, homeowners knew, I guess the contractor, when they design it to fit within that footprint, then they could know. So, I think that would be helpful. I don't know who does that, but that would be helpful.
Mark, what we're gonna do, we will have a summation of this meeting put together. That's part of what our staff will do. And we'll be able to pick up on some of the issues that you all have mentioned. I'm gonna be very interested in seeing if all of you with your expertise identify some areas where the council might recommend some proactive legislation that would assist in helping people and helping this kind of project. Clarify not only what you all are doing, but ways everybody can work together and incentives to see that. Yeah, go ahead.
Move on. So there was a motion made earlier, and I just wanted to clarify that and make sure that if you all wanted to vote on that, you did.
I can clarify the motion again, we're reiterating it. It's just that I think EPC has made a great step forward here, and I think sharing what they've done with Port Tampa Bay, with Manatee and Pinellas, just as information and suggesting that they look into opportunities to make it easier to permit these projects and incentivize as appropriate.
We will take that back when we report to the council as
So
well.
if you made the motion, do we have a?
Yes, we had a second, we had a vote. Yeah.
Before we vote on that?
Yes.
Because, so the intent, I think, it sounds like is to go to the regional planning council with this. I would propose that maybe we expand that motion to include all the counties within the regional planning council's area of responsibility. Because I think that's a really good point, and it would be great to share that information with Hernando County, Citrus County as well.
Exactly. And that's why we have the setup that we have here. This committee is extremely important to the regional council because all the brains that are in this room and experience that you have, the council as a whole depends on that so that we can make good cooperative recommendations.
I'll make that part of the.
Yeah, okay. Did you want to vote on it again? You want to do an amen vote? Go ahead. Let's have an amen. On favor of amening his motion, say aye. Opposed? Okay, amen. Going. We're gonna move on to some other presentations that are very important. We're going to have Jim Jacobson. There he is. He's with the Florida Department of Transportation, and he's going to be talking about the erosion issues and solutions for the crossbow. Jim?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jim Jacobson. I've been with the Florida Department of Transportation since 1999 when I joined the Bridge office here in Tampa. My office covers the west coast of Florida from Citrus County down to Collier County and over to Okeechobee County, Glades County, Polk County, and D1. So it's a very large area. As far as my office goes, our role is really a maintenance office. We inspect, maintain, and operate drawbridges. We collaborate with our other groups, which starts like with Allison's group, our environmental, which is under design. So as we collaborate with them, they set the standards for the bridge designs through the new requirements, through permitting, and then it goes to construction. And then that's another opportunity. As you'll see, there's going to be some changes during construction on a bridge. And then ultimately, when the bridge is built, it becomes under my office's care to maintain and improve as much as possible throughout its life. All right, that'll work. So I found this slide. This was a pamphlet in my office from a gentleman, a Skyway engineer that retired about 5 years ago, and he actually worked with Dr. Luther, Mr. Steve Womble. Back in 1969, when they were building the second Skyway bridge, we have a report, erosion study. So this is nothing new. Back then, it looks like the causeway was just kind of sand between the bridges piled up, and then they kind of waited to see what happens. So soon after that causeway was built, you can see the profiles taken. There in the middle, the dotted lines is where the shoreline's growing a bit, and over to the left, the hash marks, that's where the shoreline was being lost, encroaching up towards the first bridge there. I like to note in the middle, due to serious erosion, contractor continues to replace fill in this area. So that's during the construction of the bridge. So this is nothing new, but we have learned over time to hopefully harden these structures and approaches. And I do need to share, this is a comprehensive subject covering both the bridges and the causeways. There's been some discussion of the Courtney Campbell shoreline, some erosion there. We have another team working on that. So we promised to come back and talk more about globally about the causeways, the roadways themselves. Today, I was really going to focus on the bridges and give you that perspective. So in history with our bridges, so our Tampa Bay crossings were built, Courtney Campbell 1974, Gandy, the older 75, then the newer 96, and then 69 for the old Howard Franklin, 91 for the newer. So it's a combination of age. And what was learned in the 1980s was that some of the pilings on these older bridges were not deep enough. There wasn't a hydraulic study done. So the FHWA mandated that we look at that, and every state look at that. Fortunately for the newer bridges, just like our codes, they were deeper. So we don't have any scour critical bridges as far as the pilings go in Tampa Bay here, at least on our major crossings. The newer Howard Franklin Bridge I just checked on, they're driving the pilings between 50 feet and 200 feet. I mean, it's really deep. They're going down to rock. The older bridges that may not have been as deep, they have been protected. The existing Gandy has intermediate protection. But it's interesting as time goes, again, the codes increase. So the foundations themselves, we have been confident for many years now since they've been protected that we don't have a risk there. But what's been learned since then is, well, the bridge has to touch down somewhere. And that point where it touches the causeway, the abutment is called, that last set of pilings where it transitions to the road, that's a vulnerable area or an area that needs to be protected. And that was really seen down in Hurricane Ian. Of all that devastation down there, all the coastal bridges survived. The bridge structure stayed. It just lost that approach where it met the land. And so that's an area that we've been looking at. And that's an area of focus, of vulnerability that we want to keep more resilient. The subject of scour is an interesting one. Basically, it's removing of sand and sediment due to flowing water. If you've ever stood on the beach with bare feet and a wave comes by, you feel the sand moving away. That's what scour is. And there's two types. There's the local scour, which is that result of the pilings or an object that you put in the water. And anytime you put that, it disrupts the flow and can wash away sand. And there's another scour, which is called contraction scour. That's when if you constrain a waterway, maybe build a causeway, that can remove just the entire bottom. So together, you can lose a lot of material. As I said, for the bridge pilings themselves, that has not been a problem for us in Tampa Bay. However, as I said, the bridge has to touch down somewhere. So here's the Courtney Campbell after a tropical storm. This is the western end. It's protected by the standards. There's no open soil or sand, but the riprap bag, somehow water found a way under and started collapsing that. So we did an emergency repair, put it back with, I think, fiber reinforced concrete. But that also told us, well, you know, tropical storm can damage something. And it was built to the standards, but can we do better? What needs to happen? Can we upgrade it? And so that's what's happening right now. You can see there was some riprap there, but it's getting displaced. A seawall cap was added. And in fact, that was added, I think, to keep people from driving into the water, but it also helps with waves. I don't have a lot of clearance under that bridge though, because it's pretty tight, but this slope is the one that had the issue. And so we have a project that's in design right now. It should be going out to bid in December. It's been, as I said, we permitted and been working on it a couple of years. It's going to add a lot more of the riprap, bedding stone. Here's the bay, here's the first set of pilings. This walkway underneath will be preserved, and it's actually kind of the driveway, but then that really tight spot, I know the contractor is not gonna like us, but he's gonna have to work right under there to get stone and take out that one layer and build multiple layers of resiliency to keep, keep future storms from damaging that area. That's covering both sides where the big bridge touches down. So I'll work from north to south on our bridges. So that's what we have going on the Courtney Campbell. As I said, there'll be another meeting. We need to talk about the causeway and some of the ongoing issues out there further from the bridge. The next bridge down is the Howard Franklin. Well, when you have a new bridge being built, that's a wonderful opportunity to, of course, get it up to code, but also even during construction of New Howard Franklin, they were incorporating what they learned from Sanibel. So these are the extra, in addition to our normal codes, these are extra items that are being implemented from lessons learned, as I said, with Hurricane Ian. This is, both sides are gonna be improved, but this is the Pinellas end. The details, and I'll drill into the deeper details, but it's substantially improving the resiliency of the approach. Again, where the bridge touches down to the land is an area where that, and I mentioned scour, but there's also where you touch down, there's the waves. So in the middle of the bay where in the middle of the bridge where there's pilings, you don't get that much wave energy, it's above. But where the bridge touches down, you have the waves and you have the scour working in conjunction. An improvement here is going to be, during Sanibel, we learned that even though they had mats protecting the abutment walls, water found a way through small gaps and then started eroding it out. It's amazing how that works. So an innovation is to add an extra cutoff. This is just basically a barrier wall filling that gap against between the wall that supports the bridge fill and the slab that goes down to the seawall. So if you fill that in with a small barrier wall of concrete, and then they added a FRP. So we're not using steel reinforcement in that area. It's fiberglass or carbon fiber reinforcement, so it won't corrode and deteriorate over time. So that's one of the innovations. Since there's one, the others were, they don't really show it here, but behind the barrier wall, the MSE wall, which is that vertical wall, typically fine materials used because you can't get heavy equipment to compact it. Well, if you have a breach in that wall, that sand can wash out easily. So now they're using a gravel. So it's something that won't come out like an hourglass. And that's what happened at Sanibel. You had water got behind and it just washes. So you want to use more resilient material like that flowable fill, which has cement mixed into it, or a gravel that won't wash away. So that's some of the initiatives. The north side is permitted already due to the new project that's going on. That was easy to implement these changes during construction. The south radius is starting the permit process now because it wasn't part of the project, because it wasn't going to be touched. That's where the existing bridge is. So going down to the Gandy bridges. So many years ago, nicknamed them the Handy Gandys. Well, they've been good to me as far as they haven't been a big problem at all for my office with erosion. And I think the biggest thing is, yes, this is during a tropical storm or hurricane, but look where the abutments are. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bents deep before you even get to the approach, and it's coming up in elevation. So we're having erosion there, but it's no consequence to the bridge. So, and then the other protection of the bridge, it looks like a jumble. They cut through, I think, a 1950 seawall there to put the 1975 bridge, I believe. Yeah, that would have been the 1975. So the original protection is still there from the 1920s, 1930s. It's kind of a jumble, but it's further away. And So, and I know the Gandys are under a PD&E study looking at long-term options. But Ms. Tapley's presentation, it gives kind of an idea, well, maybe there's some opportunity, since we have so much land to protect that area, to enhance it, without having to go to like the Howard Franklin approach, where you have deep water, waves, scour right by the bridge. You really have to harden it with extreme materials. Here, if you have an opportunity of a shore or distance, you can use other perhaps methods to break the energy before it can reach the bridge. The last down below there is the Skyway Bridge corridor. And I should have said, we did not sustain, we were very fortunate in this hurricane that came by. Even though we had overwash of our roads, Courtney Campbell had seaweed, we had Gulf Drive with sand, we had the Skyway approaches. We did not have major structural erosion around the bridges. So it did not have the energy, it had the elevation of water, but it did not have the wave energy, perhaps, that some storms would. So as far as the Skyway, to find photos, the only damage I really could find, and I was out there that morning 2 weeks ago, daylight, looking at the bridge on the south. We had other people on the north. Even though this isn't about the causeway, I had to include this because this is one area at the very south end of the bridge that was eroding. We had failure of the approach pavement as it washed over. Just beyond those mangroves is the area where the wave attenuating devices started, those pyramids that were out on the Skyway that have been installed. So that area did not deteriorate. So I just wanted to put this as perhaps a plug for a future meeting or study, that the area that had the wave attenuating devices and improved seawall did not have damage. The area beyond it, which is really getting tucked back in almost to the mangroves, had some damage, and then they're looking to restore that. Here's a view during the storm on when I was out there. See if I can play it. I don't know if it'll play, but it's basically the WADs, wave attenuating devices, are where the water is breaking offshore. So it looks like it did its job. The waves were breaking there, so when they broke up on the shoreline, they had less energy. So just kind of an observation I wanted to, I'm sure they'll have a more comprehensive review of the storm and how it worked out, but from a firsthand view out there, it definitely seemed to be helping. Yeah. It's kind of hard to see, but the waves, you can tell they were definitely breaking offshore first. So some of that energy gets rolled and dispersed, and then the secondary waves hitting the shore were not nearly as strong. So I think that's indicates a successful project. So that was the basic overview of the bridges. So I'm open for questions.
Some questions.
From an engineering standpoint, has there been any study on a variable shape to the shoreline that might dissipate some of that energy?
You say variable shape with what type of structure?
Currently, we've got a shoreline that's hardened in a perfect semicircle or a square. You know, is there any looking at a jagged, excuse me, a jagged shape to that seawall or pointed that might change that a little bit? That would.
Yeah, there's been several studies done of from FHWA on down to looking at what can be improved from elevating gains. I did not see that one specifically, but that's an idea. Anything that can break the wave energy economically is you know, the best. So yeah, I have to look more into that, but
there's a lot of research right now into wind mitigation in larger buildings by using a variable shape across the building. It really changes the dynamics of the wind coming across it. So it might work in the water too.
Okay. Well, wind and water both are liquids, so to speak, flowing. So that makes sense that it might be an option. In fact, I think, well, the wave attenuating devices, the pyramids are kind of doing that because they have gaps between them that allow water. So it does break the wave and change the energy. So it would, that's probably the closest thing we have. Riprap rubble, the large bank and shore, that probably does it on a very local basis as wave hits it. It's, so if we just put a seawall, it's, that wave's gonna hit it, it's gonna reflect back and, you know, bother somebody else. But if you have the sloping with the rubble, that breaks that wave and disperses the energy, plus it's more environmentally better for the animals that can use that as a habitat or future mangroves. So I think we kind of accomplished that on a small way, but yeah. You know, changing the shoreline profile could also.
Yes, ma'am.
So one of the things that we've talked about at earlier meetings of the ABM are the effects possibly of these bridges on the water quality and the movement within Old Tampa Bay. We have all of these bridges that are, you know, crossing specifically Old Tampa Bay and things like the residents of the water within the bay being affected maybe by the fact that you have all these causeways and so forth. And I know that a lot of what you as an engineer are working on is just basic stability of the situation there, but I'm wondering, you know, I'm sure that you're also taking into account the actual physical presence of these structures on the habitats and the seagrass and the water clarity, which is something that we've been very concerned about, you know, for, you know, the whole time. So I just wanted to let you talk about that for a minute.
Sure, and that was, you're exactly right, when these causeways were built, really mainly starting in the 50s and perhaps even before for the Campbell. That's what they did. It was cheaper to pump in the sand and make a small crossing versus the large bridge. It was an economical approach, but now we realize, yeah, there's an effect on the bay. So I think there was the one initiative that DOT has done, which is installing a small bridge on the north end of the Courtney Campbell through the causeway, which I'm understanding has helped. It's definitely a lot of flow through that bridge. If there's a new bridge, I don't see causeway concept being ever used again, but since they're there, that's the challenge. You know, is there funding to ever take them out and do massively long bridges? That would be a long-term question, but you know, just going back to the Gandy, one takeaway of that is where it touches down beyond the shore seems to be a benefit. And we have a state bridge, Matanzas Pass, it's literally right on Florida Beach, just across. Fortunately for us, the touchdown points were away from the waterway. And then there's parking and docks and stuff under there, but that bridge did not get damaged versus some of the ones on the coast where the water was right against the abutment. They received the damage. So there seems to be a good logic to touching down at a stable point, not on a causeway, if you have that option.
Okay, Ed.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment from Ann and Jen's response. You know, I know our sort of position on trying to improve water quality as best we can through increased tidal circulation. And I think you kind of touched on it, and the causeways are the vulnerable part of that infrastructure, right? And in some cases, that's a good design point to combat storms, so that, you know, $1 billion bridge isn't collapsed in the bay. But at the same time, there's only so much we could do in terms of armoring some of those existing causeways without sort of heeding the lessons learned of some of our past efforts to combat erosion along the beaches. I mean, we've tried different armoring tactics for years along the beaches, and we're now recognizing that, you know, more nature-based interventions make more fiscal sense. So I guess at what point, from DOT's perspective, does ongoing maintenance and installation of hardened structures to protect the causeways outweigh pursuing an additional bridge expanse? Particularly if you have like problematic areas where you're seeing increased erosion, you could armor that area, but you might just be focusing that energy somewhere else along that vulnerable causeway. So it'd be nice to see sort of that cost benefit of what is the tipping point for ongoing maintenance and protecting some of these existing land bridges in the bay versus just, biting the bullet and constructing that bridge at that point.
Yeah, understanding that should be any of the PDD studies that are done for these bridges, I think we consider the benefits, looking at the options. I don't know if they've gone to the point of full removal of causeways. That's a whole nother concept and a whole nother cost level. But that's definitely an equation that should be looked at. We have been fairly fortunate over the years. This is the Gandy bridge themselves. Again, the causeway might have other work going on, but we haven't had to spend a lot on the Gandy. We've had some repairs on the Courtney Campbell Skyway over the years, some repairs, and then I think the 1993 storm of the century damaged some of the Howard Franklin, and then that was updated with improved seawall caps and barriers on top. So there's been improvements over the years, but we don't have I don't think it's like the beaches where we have an ongoing dredging or renourishment. The causeways have been pretty stable, at least around the bridges, up until the points we found where we want to improve them over time. So, but it definitely should be looked at as far as what is the best use of the money long term.
And thank you for that. And I think, when we talk about resiliency of this infrastructure, we could armor those causeways, but if they're underwater, they're not serving as evacuation routes. That's not very resilient infrastructure either. And those are sort of the trade-offs we have to consider when we make these large-scale public investments. And again, I appreciate, working with the DOT on these questions and looking for those opportunities where it makes sense to look for ancillary benefits as it pertains to improvements in water quality, as well as protecting the existing infrastructure. But at some point, there has to be sort of that long-term view and cost assessment of how much more money are we going to be putting into protecting certain areas that are known erosional areas and where it's receiving a lot of energy. We could protect that. We're just going to be refocusing somewhere else where we're going to have to maintain that area next, and then that area. So we kind of get in this perpetual loop of sort of what armoring is going to be needed next.
Understand that. That's good points, and I believe DOT needs to continue that conversation as these projects develop.
Do you have any other plans for the use of the WADs along any of the causeways?
I have heard discussion, and we have ongoing meetings, and I mentioned our office is the bridge operations maintenance side, but we have monthly meetings. Tara Rodriguez, my office, is the organizer, and we are meeting with our development, Allison's environmental group, construction, and just having discussions of what are you doing? What are we doing? Just making sure we're all on the same page. The question has come up, if this is working into Skyway, can we use that somewhere else? And it would also depend on, is that the appropriate, like what's right for the Skyway with very high wave energy? The fetch length of the bay is 9 miles of open water, deep water, which, the waves is a function of the fetch length, wind speed, water depth. The north end of the Courtney Campbell has a different dynamic, a flatter shoreline, small waves. So maybe it needs smaller ones, or maybe living shoreline there, it depends on the location of energy, probably the appropriate. The discussion has started, that project has a lot of attention. So whether it's a dome type structures versus SWADs, that should all be looked at. And I believe that is going to be talked about further during our meetings to see what is the best way to help erosion in that area.
Okay, I
Slow down erosion.
think George had his hand raised. Did you say?
Yeah, I sort of just have a conceptual observation. And it's a difficulty that I think a lot of the environmental community has had with DOT in the past. And this discussion we've just had exemplifies it, that you're so compartmentalized that you deal with the bridges. There's some other guy dealing with the causeways. And the discussion we had here was where the two met. But the it seems maybe back in, 3 levels up in the planning and engineering folk are looking at the bigger question Kemp Bay Estuary program is looking at in terms of what's the overall dynamic of the system. The system in this case being the causeway and the bridge. They don't sit by themselves. It's only one's there only because of the other. And I would really like to see a more comprehensive approach on the part of DOT. And I've said this for 40 years, to deal with these issues going forward. And you really haven't done that. I'm sorry to say.
Well, it takes a lot of entities and communication. We appreciate the fact that you've come here and you're sharing this with us. And we'll be sharing the thoughts of this group too, hopefully encouraging the best for all of us.
Thank you. We need to repeat, we are having ongoing meetings of all those disciplines. We're not in a silo. We have our expertise, which is important, but we're also meeting and collaborating to know what's going on and learning from each other. So that's what our ongoing collaborations meetings are. Not everybody went down to Sanibel to see and learn about what exactly happened and how can that be used in maintenance. So it's important that we keep sharing that. So those are the ongoing meetings that we do have, which are important. So by all means, we do collaborate fully on what we're doing.
We appreciate that very much, and we'll be inviting you back periodically for updates on what's going on and suggestions and idea sharing. But thank you very much. We have, anyone else have anything else they want to bring up with this gentleman?
Are they also providing habitat for fish and so forth? Is that, I've only driven past them quickly. So, and I've seen them going in on that south end of the Skyway.
Yes, they definitely provide habitat. That's kind of a win-win scenario out there because they'll break the energy, but they also provide, there's already oysters and barnacles and things growing on them. They provide habitat for small animals there, but also what is going to happen, or we hope, is on between the WADs and the shoreline that the seagrass can regrow. And if you look at a Google map of the, I don't know if it was the county, somebody installed them along up by Apollo Beach. There's some layers of them there, and you can look at the aerial photo and you see sand, but you see the WADs, then you see seagrass behind them. So they break the energy enough to allow habitat to grow behind there, and that's still water. So yes, that's a definitely.
Will you monitor those then? How long? What is that going to be an ongoing process to see?
Well, as far as they'll be reviewed by the DOT, ongoing monitored over time. Just like after the storm, we were already learning that we had less damage along the causeway, the asphalt, versus where it wasn't protected. So there'll definitely be follow up on there, and again, can it be used in other areas? Maybe change different, but that's definitely this is a good pilot project to see where else it could be used along our bridges.
How do the boaters understand where they're at along the shoreline? Because that always kind of confuses me on when you're in a boat and you're coming up in there. How are those marked?
Sure, they're going to have, I believe, signs at each end with the diamond, the warning for boaters. They are parallel to the shore, just a couple 100 feet off. They're not in any, where you cut through that small cut bridge, they're not at that point. So there's really, unless you are aiming directly towards the shore in a boat, you're not going to be in conflict with them to begin with. But they will be highlighted with markers though to delineate.
Should also be added to the knowledge.
That's what I was thinking. I was
They'll update the
interested to
nautical
see.
stuff. Now that they're all digital, they get
Now
updated quite
they
frequently.
can update them quick.
For the
That's important.
Thanks again, Jim. We
I just
really
had a-
appreciate it. Is there some, did you
Yeah,
have something?
real quick follow-up with respect.
Listen, for the record, would you say your name?
Oh, Yeah, Chris Anastasio, Swiftmud. Just was thinking out loud, that the WADs, obviously they do a great job of attenuating that wave energy. Is there, have you looked at the possibility of using them to help minimize that scour around the bridge pilings, or would that not really work in that location?
I've seen different types of scour protection. We historically have used large rubble riprap or mats connected with concrete, kind of a profile to allow the water to flow. Any large object, again, we have wave energy, we have water flow. The scour came from the rapidly flowing. If we put something in front of it, we could cause a scour problem to the smaller pilings. I've heard of like deflectors used, but I think our standard designs, even from the federal examples and studies, are pretty standard as far as riprap rubble or articulating block, and along the shore, the grout fill mats. So those are the standard protections. As I said, fortunately, as far as the bridge pilings, they're either deep or they've been protected. So we don't have any new projects planned. But the WADs definitely are designed for the wave energy specifically, which.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you so much, and we'll be inviting you back again, and just keep us plugged in. A lot of good ideas from here. Okay, next on our agenda for 7, the city of Tampa is exploring restoration opportunities in McKay Bay. And so we're joined by Whit Reamer. He's going to share more about this project and what they're going to do next. So, Whit.
Well, thanks so much for having me, everyone. And I'm gonna attempt to share the screen here and get started. Full disclosure, I am part of the project sponsor team, but actually the technical team, many of whom actually are probably sitting in the room, are probably going to be able to fill in some really important scientific and ecological details here. But I'm going to provide a high level overview of the project and some next steps that we're planning to take, and hopefully we'll be doing so with the support and partnership of the agency and other folks that are in the room. So let's see, I'm going to share screen. I'm going to do a PDF here. Let's see. That one. All right. How's that looking in terms of sharing the PDF?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm Whit Raymer. I'm the Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the City of Tampa. And today I'm going to be sharing a project that was funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, colloquially known as NIFWF. This is a project that the city worked to sponsor, but ultimately was implemented by the partners that you see on the screen. So many thanks to the University of South Florida. Ping Wang is the primary modeler from USF that helped with this. Applied Sciences, Brian Cook from Applied Sciences has done an incredible job visualizing this and really bringing this report to life. And this report, by the way, is due to NIFWF at the end of the month. So you guys are seeing the almost final, very condensed version of what will be handed over to NIFWF. This was a $200,000 grant. I don't think I mentioned the price. That was split between these partner groups. Tampa Bay Watch and the Estuary Program also provided technical support and field assistance and technical review. So many thanks to all of those wonderful partners. This is a picture of the DeSoto Park Pier, and so to better orient you where we are, this is an aerial image. So we are talking about McKay Bay today and the Palmetto Beach neighborhood. The project really focused on two things. It focused on community resilience and ecosystem restoration. So we'll touch on both of those today. McKay Bay sits just to the east of downtown Tampa and is a really important part of Tampa's history, and still serves several critical purposes, housing both the McKay Bay Peninsula, which is where the city's McKay Bay Waste Energy Facility is, It's also just north of where the Eastport expansion is planned to happen with Port Tampa Bay. And importantly, the Palmetto Beach community, which I would suggest is probably one of the last, I wouldn't call it working waterfronts, but it's got historical ties to a working waterfront community. There used to be a lot of crab shacks along there, and had the unique, somewhat unique distinction of having submerged lands that were plotted out from the seawall that we'll look at, that once housed many crab shacks, and is really a working class neighborhood right now, and is really sandwiched between a lot of development and also this incredible resource insofar as McKay Bay has historically been a really productive estuary that has, unfortunately, due to kind of development and hydrological changes that have occurred over the last 100 years there, has really kind of been cut off from really natural and important water circulation. That was primarily due to the kind of the causeway, dovetailing onto the last conversation, the causeway being built with the land bridge, and then the channelizing of the Palm River really kind of, I think, tilted the natural hydrologic cycles and flows of this area. So now that you kind of know where we are, just a couple of snapshots, and just again, I took what is, as you can see here, an 80-page report, and have tried to condense it to about 20 slides here for the benefit of the group. And if you're interested in more technical information, maybe some folks on the call, or I can follow up with you. So here's one of our, I think, our first field visits out on the boat from the estuary program and some other partners. That's the pier in the background. And as you can see already, you know, it's pretty, it can be tidally influenced, but also, you know, some pretty old infrastructure here, hardened infrastructure, and that pier itself is a land bridge itself, and also contributes to some of the water circulation issues. Here are just a couple more shots of the community. You can see the remnants of an old crab shack. I think this was lost in 2000, whatever the storm was in 2004, that affected the area. Some old oyster habitats were pretty prevalent in this area, but again, due to the silting and the water circulation issues, not as much anymore. We broke the project into or the kind of study into 5 projects. Today I'll mainly focus on project 1, which is the waterside project, and project kind of 2 and 5, which are up near DeSoto Park. There were some other inland stormwater projects and also some shoreline restoration projects that were scoped for this, but I think that this group will be most interested in projects 1 and 5, so that's what we'll focus on today. Again, just a couple of pictures of the pier. This is in pretty bad disrepair. I think the seawall is probably 100 years old or so, and the community really has voiced concern, but also support for really reimagining what this neighborhood can be. So this is kind of our first look at the current bathymetry and the morphological assessment, sediment morphological assessment that Dr. Wang put together from USF. And because of the channelization of the bypass canal, historic Palm River, you can see that water, because of the scouring and the channel that both was dredged and then naturally continued to be a relatively kind of deep cut stretching from the northeast to the southwest part of the channel, really this channel here in the middle. The water basically goes directly from Palm River bypass canal out through the causeway and doesn't circulate up into McKay Bay as it once historically did. So this was our first kind of aha moment about why the water quality was suffering there, in addition to a lot of the silting that was from the stormwater infrastructure and the dozen or so outfall canals that fall along Bermuda Boulevard. So for historical context, I mean, this is kind of what the area used to look like prior to development. And this neighborhood is called Palmetto Beach for a reason. There used to be, really nice white kind of sandy beaches there. In fact, when you look at DeSoto Park, I think I've got some other pictures here. When you look at some historic pictures of DeSoto Park, there's kind of a famous time period in DeSoto Park where tin can tourists used to visit the area. You can see some pictures of that on the Civic Association's website. And let's see, I think I got one. I don't have the tin can tourist here, but this is what Palmetto Beach really used to look like. And people would drive their like airstreams into DeSoto Park, and they would have these kind of campouts there, and it really was a popular tourist destination, both DeSoto Park and Palmetto Beach, and was really once celebrated as a very, very productive estuary and common gathering place for the people of Tampa and tourists. And we really reflected on that with the community. And again, if you go, you work with a lot of some communities, and they sometimes can be adverse to development and investments to some extent, new investments, outside investments. But we found the Palmetto Beach Civic Association to be very open and willing to kind of explore options to really rethink the infrastructure that's there and how it's currently situated as a community with the seawall and with the park, DeSoto Park. I did want to stop here and show some recent flooding. I think I have a video I'm going to try to pull up. Can you guys see the video now? Okay. So this is at, I think, 4.5 feet of surge, and you can see the seawall is completely underwater here. From what I understand, my emergency management team was out with FEMA earlier this week. There were several properties that received water in their residences and in the multifamily complexes. So this is an area that is vulnerable to both tidal influence and surge. And if the project that, from what I understand, if the project that we were envisioning that I'll tell you about today had been built, we wouldn't have had that flooding and the last storm because the seawall would have been a little bit higher. So I mentioned that this was a community resilience project, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about some of the outreach that we've done with the community, some of the charrettes and workshops. It's a very passionate community. The school down there is very, very engaged with the community, and the school down there serves as an anchor. The elementary school serves as an anchor, and we're really excited to continue working with them. And this is just really a plug for good community engagement. Okay, so back to the project. Let's see. Now I think I had another slide in there, but so this is one of the project interventions that we're most excited about. We have several alternatives. I picked kind of the biggest, most expensive one because why not? And this is really when we realized that the water circulation issue was tied to this this channel, and we kind of step back and look at some of the larger projects going on. We thought there was maybe a real opportunity here to fill the channel that would lead to greater circulation in the northern parts of the bay. And so Dr. Wang's modeling shows that with about 1 million cubic yards of material filled in the channel, that you could increase water circulation significantly into the northern reaches of DeSoto Park and Upper McKay Bay. So this is the kind of theoretical concept that we're working with right now is a channel fill project. And this is important because getting a 1 million cubic yards of material is not cheap or easy. And I think one of the reasons that Ms. Todd invited us to speak today is because I think it was last meeting on Agency on Bay Management, we had a presentation from the Army Corps of Engineers, and they talked about the opportunities for beneficial use of dredge material for their upcoming Tampa Harbor Navigation Improvement Project. And so this is located within a half mile of the upper stretches of that project. And so there was a real opportunity for us to work with the Corps, and that's what we're continuing to try to do to potentially capture some of the especially the hardened material that is in the upper reaches of the deepening project and place them beneficially here in McKay Bay. So that's really the main project. We looked at another alternative that wouldn't entirely fill the channel, but would create kind of a living breakwater diversion. I'll call it wall, but really it's just a breakwater. That only increased circulation by about 50%, but it was much cheaper and didn't require as much material. So that's another alternative I'll just kind of flag for you all. The second project that I wanted to discuss was kind of really rethinking the DeSoto Park coastline. As you can see now, it's a very hardened coastline and doesn't provide a lot of real, I think, meaningful access to the water. In addition, my great friend and colleague, Brian Cook, likes to look at things from a landscape architect and safety and community perspective. And this pier that reaches all the way out into the channel, I think presents some safety issues with some of the current uses. I think they get a little bit of a transient population out there, and it's not really something that is widely used or celebrated by the community. In addition to also being a land bridge and really restricting circulation in the upper reach of the channel there. So we started thinking about what a park redo might look like, and I'm going to go through these quick. I mean, this is kind of I'm going to go from pretty basic interventions to really redoing the entire shoreline. So, one concept would be just to introduce some living shoreline type concepts, some oyster domes and marshes. And then they get progressively more creative as we go down. This would be removing the pier and installing additional riprap. This would be a boardwalk instead of a pier, so you have circulation underneath where it's currently constricted. Again, adding oyster domes underneath there, and each of these gets, like I said, incrementally more expensive. And then we really started thinking about what about kind of maybe trying to mimic some more natural processes. I think I learned a new word. You guys probably all know this, but I like the new word. Undulation, is that right? Tom, give me a nod if that's the right word. So undulation, right? Kind of the movement, the natural movement of things. And we really started kind of looking at making this less, not many things, as I learned from Richard Campanella, the great geographer based out of New Orleans. And if you've ever studied Mr. Go and kind of the topography of New Orleans, not many things in nature are hard straight lines. And so when we look at Mr. Go, which is the Mississippi River Gulf outlet in New Orleans that caused a major flooding, that was the main culprit of the flooding during Hurricane Katrina, trying to remove hard straight lines from nature is something that I think a lot of experts are proposing and making them maybe mimic more natural processes. And so that's where we kind of got this idea of changing the shoreline to look more like something that was reminiscent of the original Palmetto Beach. And so again, as you start doing that, you can add in new boardwalks and new marsh area and mangroves, and they kind of get progressively more exciting and expensive, as you can see, $11 million. And I think that's actually my last slide, because I wanted to be relatively brief here and leave time for questions. I will share that this is a project that the city, we use the NIFWA funding as a catalyst, I think, to kind of start this conversation and these design concepts. And the city did apply to the NOAA Regional Resilience Track 2 Implementation Fund for funding this. I think the ask for this project was 25 million. We have a separate project that would redo the entire Bermuda Boulevard seawall and introduce living shorelines and piers along that shoreline, that's under a separate DOT grant. So we have $50 million worth of federal grant requests currently in the pipeline for the McKay Bay Palmetto Beach neighborhood. One final thing I'll mention, earlier in the presentation, I said that a lot of the land was plotted out into the seaward side of the seawall. Those submerged lands have presented for many years a challenge for the city to do any type of upgrades or fixes on the seawall, because technically we'd be having to enter private property if we brought barges in. I'm happy to announce that the city recently acquired 80% of the submerged lands. So we've made more progress in the last probably 6 months on this than we have in the last 10 years. And we're really excited about the future of Palmetto Beach and that community. So with that, we'll stop and see if we've got any questions that I might be able to answer.
It's a big project, to say the least, and it sounds to me sort of like he was responding to some of the comments you made earlier. Anyway, do we have some questions anyone would like to ask?
I have a couple.
Yes, sir, go ahead. Identify yourself again.
Prince Anastasio, Swift Mud. Hey, quick question, a couple of questions. One, when you were looking at the historical configuration of McKay Bay, do you have an idea of what, if any, sediment accumulation has occurred in the bay since the causeway was constructed and those alterations took place? And the other question is just, I'm curious, if you were to fill that channel, what would prevent, because presumably the Tampa Bypass Canal and the Palm River operation would remain the same, what would prevent a rescour of that channel over time?
Thanks. I'll try to answer these the best I can, and I appreciate the question from Swift Mud in particular, because we did run this by very initially by Swift Mud to make sure that we wouldn't impede any of the flood protection that the channel was designed for. And of course, the project would need to undergo additional review and modeling with Swift Mud and our partner agencies to ensure that we didn't work against any of the flood protection measures that the channel was designed for. The additional scour question, I can't answer that. I presume Dr. Wang, some of Dr. Wang's modeling looked at that, but I'm gonna defer and ask him at a later time, just to make sure I don't answer incorrectly there. On the sediment accumulation, there's a lot of sediments, primarily from my understanding from the stormwater outfall canals. It's pretty nasty stuff. That in addition to some of the historical industrial processes that have taken place up near Pond 5. So sediment is a concern. I don't think there's a concern with I don't think we touch Pond 5 in any of these projects, which is one of the more regulated areas of sediment accumulation and concern. But Ed and Maya, if you're in the room, I can't really see who's in the room. If you have any other kind of tidbits on sediment accumulation from your research and study, I'd be happy to also pass the mic off to you.
Okay. Anybody, somebody over here?
I think I wanted to respond.
You want to respond? Go ahead.
Hey, yeah, I mean, it's fairly depositional area of Tampa Bay, and if you've done any sampling in that upper left-hand lobe McKay Bay, you're gonna sink probably up to your chest in the muck accumulation that has occurred. I don't know what it is relative to like historic conditions or any of that modeling has ever been done, but there's been work through EPC to identify sediment quality action plan sites. And there are particular areas where, remediation of sediments that have fairly high contaminants is a good option, especially in those portions of the shoreline restoration that we was mentioning. So, if there's benefits to improving the wetland habitats while also dealing with some of the sediment issues up there, I think that could be a win-win for this area.
Well, yeah, and I guess that was maybe what sparked my question is if you fill that channel and encourage more circulation, are you also potentially making those sediments more mobile and potentially, moving out of there and into a wider Hillsborough Bay?
Yeah, and that's a good question. Like Whit said, I'd leave that to Wayne's
Yeah,
modeling.
yeah.
You know, that might be just the dredge material that ends up in the channels that are maintained by the Corps.
Okay, thank you. And does somebody else have something they would like to ask or comment?
I was gonna say this for announcements, but we just received at USF $3.5 million grant to do a long-term study of pollutant accumulations in sediments around all of Tampa Bay, particularly looking at PFAS, forever chemical type accumulation. So we hope to be able to address some of those questions in more detail in the very near future. And plus, back in 2002 to 2008, we did several studies in McKay Bay and the Palm River for Tampa Bay Water and for the Tampa Bay Port Authority. If you haven't seen those, I'll be happy to share those with you as well.
Well, keep us all plugged in on that, and certainly I know Chris would appreciate whatever you could share with him. Thank you.
So may I ask who that was that
That was Mark Luther, sorry, USF College of Marine Science.
Oh, hey, Dr. Luther. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'd love to connect some dots there on the sediment because I think it's a great question from Swift Mud and something that we definitely will want to address. So good. Thanks for that.
Somebody else?
I would just say, hey, wait, this is Colleen.
Colleen, say your name because he can't see who you are.
I was gonna get there this time, I remember. Hey, Whit, this is Colleen from, Colleen Weaver from Pasco County. Great presentation. I love all the different ideas and thought processes. So have you ordered like the battle that, how are you identifying what's gonna end up being your best project? Cause you got a lot of options on the table there. And then the timing, what kind of timing are you all looking and funding? You know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think you already answered the question. Timing and funding. I mean, really, those are the two things that will decide the project's success. I mean, we applied for the, and again, we're trying to figure out a lot of ways to slice the pie right now, but we applied for a raise grant on Bermuda Boulevard. And again, I didn't talk a whole lot about Bermuda Boulevard, but and we unfortunately didn't win that. So we applied for the Protect grant for Bermuda Boulevard. And then we applied for the NOAA transformational habitat for the presentation that I gave today. We were very, very close to being awarded that, but to your point, they were kind of like, you guys gave us a lot of ideas. Which one do you want to do? You kind of need to commit. And I don't think we were quite ready to commit at that point because we were in the early phases of this project. We did go ahead and apply for the regional habitat, the regional resilience one. I suspect if my gut tells me we probably won't actually be awarded the regional resilience one, because my hope is that maybe NOAA, now that we are closer to kind of locking in and having better financial projections for these, they might give us a better look at the second pass of the transformational habitat. So I think the answer is timing, funding, and also community kind of engagement and support. Which one do they prefer? And I mean, ultimately, with the cost of everything, those are some pretty big projects to change a lot of shoreline, and there's some pretty big price tags. So I guess we'll see. Again, timing with the Corps is another really important aspect, and the Corps has a beneficial use of dredge material pilot program for small and disadvantaged areas, and Palmetto Beach would certainly qualify for that. So we're also looking at some additional funding from the Corps. And again, the Corps typically would start their dredging projects from the south moving northward. So if the timing and the funding, most of the NOAA funds have to be spent by 2027, which is about a year into the Corps dredging project, and we really can't do anything with the channel without that beneficial use. The price goes from $3 million for that dredge material to 28, 29 if we have to go buy that type of material on the open market. So the project really only works financially if a partnership with the Corps is able to be kind of solidified under their beneficial use program. So we still have some additional questions, but I think we're making good progress.
Project. I love the cultural, the pieces you laid on the table were beautiful. Thank you for your work.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, your production was very good. Anybody else have anything they would like to ask Chris or bring up, observations? Anything? Okay, Chris, again, thank you. It's a wit. All right. Boy, I tell you. Need to put my glasses on. Thanks again. We really appreciate your participation.
Yes, ma'am.
And everybody in the room, we appreciate what you've done and what you said, but you can't leave yet because we are, in my opinion, at one of the most important parts of the meeting. First of all, does anyone have any announcements they want to make about something that your group is doing or you represent that you want to bring up? Yes, sir.
Another project is Mark Luther, USF College of Marine Science. We're part of our Center for Ocean Mapping and Innovative Technologies. We're conducting we call it crowdsourced bathymetry program for Tampa Bay to try to get loggers on as many recreational or commercial vessels as we can that regularly drive around Tampa Bay to collect all of their depth sounder information along with their GPS timestamp information that can all go into making better nautical charts and looking for areas where the depth is changing, they're showing over that sort of thing. We're having an all-day workshop next Thursday, September 21st, to try to bring as many of the local boating community in as possible. If anyone here is interested in that, please reach out to me and we'll give you the details of that. You're welcome to attend. So far, we got Port Tampa Bay, U.S. Coast Guard, Freedom Boating Club, Seabolt Commercial Towing. Several other people are already in attendance, but we've got room for more if anybody's interested.
Would you do us a favor? I want people to ask him after the meeting if you have questions, but also please let Alana know, because if you have regularly scheduled activities and we want everyone to know about it or participate, let us know. We can put it online. We can send it out to you. Because we only have what, 4 meetings a year, and you just can't possibly cover everything. So I really appreciate it. Does anyone else have an announcement they want to make then? Because then I'm going to ask you all something else. Yes, sir.
Ed, you go first. You go. Chris Anastasio, Swiftmud. Just wanted to update the group on July 25th, our governing board approved the update to our Tampa Bay swim plan to go out for agency review. So it is currently in review for agencies. Many of you probably have received the letter to review that. That review period for agencies ends on September 25th. After which we will address any and all comments that come in from the various agencies. And then the plan will go before the board later in the year for final approval. And then the update to the Tampa Bay swim plan will be complete. It is available. The draft July 2023 version of the swim plan is available on our website for anyone who is interested to take a look at it. Just go to watermatters.org and go to the Tampa Bay swim section and you'll find it.
Okay, thank you. Ed.
2 quick ones. So following up on sort of the conversation about incentives for enhancing altered waterfronts, we have our Bay Mini grant program closing tomorrow. So please turn in proposals or work with any community groups that you might be working with to look at ways we could enhance living shorelines on properties along the bay. That's a high priority under that Bay Mini grant program. And again, it closes tomorrow. So get with those groups and get your applications in. The second announcement is we currently have a Old Tampa Bay Similar Capacity Assessment RFP back out on the streets. We're asking for proposals to look at basically the nutrient budget and diet for Old Tampa Bay. especially as it relates to planned management interventions in the region and how that might affect us attaining water quality conditions conducive for continued seagrass recovery in Old Tampa Bay. So that those proposals would be due October 27th, and we're asking for projects up to about $320,000. So if you're interested, please check out our website, tbep.org. You get more details on the Bay Mini Grant program and that open RFP.
Okay, any other announcements that are timely? Yes, sir.
Mark Show with Audubon, Florida. I'm just putting in a plug for Audubon Assembly, which is our annual gathering for Audubon, Florida. Around the state, it's going to be in the Tampa Bay area this year, October 26th to 28th. Go to I think it's fl.audubon.org. If you want to details about field trips, there's a trip to the Alibi Bank that will be leading, and some good presentations.
Yeah, I still thought I saw another hand up. Yes, sir.
Sure. Peter Clark, Tampa Bay Watch. Sarah and her team have our fall restoration dates for community projects. So you can go online and see what oyster restoration projects, our monofilament cleanup. We're even doing, which hasn't been scheduled yet, but a prop scar repair project at Bay Point Park coming up as well. So if you or your community group would like to get more involved with hands-on projects, come visit us at tampabaywatch.org. We also have our 30-year anniversary celebration on October 20th that will be held at our Marine Center out in Tierra Verde.
21st.
21st. Thank you. Come one, come all.
Don't come on the
It's gonna be
20th.
great. Come on the 20th if you want to help set up table.
Okay, Alana's
Thank you.
taking notes, so y'all, if you forgot something or you were too shy, I don't think anyone here is shy.
Well, this Saturday is our annual Hillsborough County Coastal Cleanup Day.
When is that?
This Saturday, the 16th. There's several sites in Tampa. Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful is in charge of the organization for that. If you want to sign up to volunteer, you can do that. McKay Bay is one of those sites. And Tampa Bay Environmental Professionals Organization is sponsoring McKay Bay on Saturday. So if you want to sign up with them, you can go to their website or you can go to Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful if you're interested in getting a close-up look at McKay Bay. But there are also 30 other sites around Tampa that you can sign up for.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Wait, Sally Thompson, please.
Who is that?
Sally. Evelyn.
This is
Oh,
Sally
Sally.
Thompson.
Sally
Sally
Thompson, go ahead, please.
Hello? Okay.
Hello, we're listening.
I just wanted to thank you, Alana, and for making the announcement back in June about the USF Special Collections of digitizing Skip Gandy's aerial photography. I know that anyway, enough funding was raised that it's going full force. So that's pretty exciting that it kind of fills in where the Burgett brothers left off, and we've supported in the past Skip's work. So thank you very much. And did anybody mention anything about the Birding and Nature Festival? Is Ann all around?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So I at meetings, I've been bringing up the Florida Birding and Nature Festival, which is supported by many of you, and including the ESPRI program and EPC. Thank you. But I just want to say that is coming up. It's going to be our 7th year that we've done the birding festival since it was revived. And it's going to be in Apollo Beach at the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's Suncoast Youth Conservation Center, which is on Dickman Road, south of the Manatee Viewing Center, on October 12th through 15th. We've got field trips on all 4 days. We have the Nature Expo, seminars, and keynotes on Friday and Saturday. And so it's just going to be a very exciting event. And Pat is going to be there to welcome people on Friday evening. And thank you so much, Pat, for your participation in this. Pat County Commissioner for Hillsborough County. So please come to that and let your birding and natural nature appreciation people know about it. One of the saddest things that will happen if somebody says later, I didn't know you had a festival. Let's let everybody know so they have the opportunity to come. So
Any more dates or events that we need to bring up here?
I just had a question for Sally.
Go right ahead.
Hey Sally, the digitizing of Skip Gandy's photography are those gonna be, is there any way to geo-rectify those? I mean, will we be able to use those in a ArcGIS fashion?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Sally.
Can't hear you, you're muted.
Okay, okay. I would say, get in touch with Andy Hughes out at Special Collections and he at USF, and he can tell you how you can use them.
Great, thank you.
Sure, and can you get rid of my picture, please?
I think a lot of the existing collection that was included is oblique photos, so it's not like straight area.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else have an announcement they want to make? Cause I've got one I want to make to you. First of all, I'm gonna tell you, I think this is one of the neatest groups I've ever had the opportunity to participate with. Because you all are teaching each other, but you're teaching me a lot. And I respect that so very, very much. And the regional council appreciates what you do because it adds so much more credibility to what we're trying to do to get people to work together. There's so many of the issues we have that we share individually, but there are ways sometimes that we can be stronger when we work together. And with that in mind, I had a meeting with Vicki Parsons. I also mentioned this to the chair of the Regional Planning Council, Woody, who's the current chair and will be the chair next year, that we want to get more involvement with you all and a higher awareness of environmental issues in Tampa Bay. So we're going to start a series in our magazine. It's going to be called Treasures of Tampa Bay. And each of you will participate in some capacity or another in this. I or Vicki or Liz may come and visit you. We may visit members of the regional council and ask you individually, what are the projects that you're so proud of that you're doing in your area, in your city or your county? What do you think that the general public needs to be looking at? How can we make them more productive in some capacity or another to help you? And how can we, as an entity, the Agency on Bay Management, work more effectively together? And then we're going to feature articles about each of these areas in our magazine and hopefully encourage more presentations here and online, because this is very, very important. People come to this area because they love it, but we want to make sure that in all times we're all students of the environment and we work on it. So just a heads up, if you get a phone call, appreciate your help, because we think that, I know we're making a difference. You all are making a difference and we're so proud of you and respect you so much. Is there anything that anyone else would like to suggest for our next meeting? We have ideas, but if you got any one of you have something that you would like us to look at this point? Yes, Anne.
I would love to hear more about the causeway work that the DOT is doing.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else? Any of you want to brag about something your group's doing?
So at the December meeting, I would like us to revisit our operating procedures for the ABM, including our membership. They haven't been updated. I think it's been 12 years now since the last update with the operating procedures. So just want us to look at them. Also maybe revisit our meeting time. I know some of our members have not been able to join us because they have other engagements. So it's just something for us to explore. I'll send out a doodle poll for next year ahead of that December meeting so we can pick a meeting date for 2024 at the December meeting. So just stay tuned and I'll be sending all of the operating procedures, our organizational statement out, and then we'll revise those at the next meeting.
And our next meeting is scheduled for December 14th. Be sure to put that on your calendar. There will be an update of all of this meeting online so that if you want to share it with other groups or your agencies, you can do that. Is there anything else anyone else would like to bring up at this time? Thank you all for coming and for participating. We deeply appreciate it. This meeting is adjourned.
So